The auction house smelled of sweat and despair. I stood on the raised platform in my council silks, my veil covering my face, watching as they brought out lot 734. He was tall, powerfully built despite visible malnutrition, his skin marked with scars that told stories of violence and survival. His hair fell in tangled black waves past his shoulders, and his eyes were the color of molten gold, and they blazed with an intelligence that shouldn't have been possible. The collar locked around his throat was supposed to suppress that. It was supposed to reduce them to docile animals who could follow simple commands but nothing more. Yet this man looked at the crowd with undisguised contempt, his posture radiating defiance, even as the guards prodded him with charged staffs. An alpha of prime strength, the auctioneer droned, captured in the western wilds 5 years ago during the final border sweeps. Unbroken. Recommended for high-security labor only. We'll start bidding at 500 credits. Unbroken. The word echoed in my mind. According to council literature, there was no such thing as unbroken after 5 years of collar conditioning. The device was foolproof, scientifically designed to reshape neural pathways until all that remained was base instinct and obedience. This man's existence contradicted everything I'd been told. The bidding was sluggish. Most buyers wanted compliant alphas who wouldn't require constant supervision. 200 credits? 250? 300. I watched him scan the crowd, and when his gaze landed on me, the world seemed to contract to just the two of us. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, we simply looked at each other. I saw rage in his eyes, yes, and pain, and bone-deep exhaustion. But I also saw a person, not an animal. A human being, trapped inside a prison of metal and cruelty. My mother's words echoed in my mind. What are we becoming? 1,000 credits, I heard myself say. The crowd gasped. Lyra, my beta assistant, touched my arm urgently. Counselor Voss, that's more than double. 1,000 credits, I repeated, louder. The auctioneer's gavel fell. Sold to Counselor Seraphine Voss. As they led him away in chains, the alpha looked back at me. It wasn't gratitude in his eyes. It was a question, sharp and probing. What do you want from me? The air in my study always smelled of lavender and old parchment, a scent I'd found comforting for as long as I could remember. I sat at my mother's old desk hours after the auction, running my fingers over the carved wood grain, tracing patterns she must have touched 1,000 times before she died. The journal lay open before me, its yellowed pages showing her elegant handwriting, words written just over 8 years ago. They told us the collars were humane, she'd written, that they merely suppressed aggression, made alphas safe for civilized society. But I have seen the way Counselor Thane's estate alpha stares at nothing, drool collecting at the corner of his mouth. That is not suppression. That is obliteration. What are we becoming? My hands shook as I traced the words. Mother had died when I was 14, a fall from the balcony that Father insisted was an accident. I'd stopped believing that lie 3 years ago when I'd found her journals hidden behind a false panel in this very desk. She'd been investigating the collar program, asking questions about the Great Northern Purge, requesting historical records that kept being misplaced. And then she'd fallen. I'd found another entry 2 months ago, the one that had changed everything. Dr. Yaren, the beta scientist who designed the original collar prototype, had confessed to my mother before he died. The collars were never meant to be permanent. They were emergency battlefield suppressors, designed for 1 or 2 hours before causing permanent neural damage. But they'd been refined to be wearable indefinitely. Each collar is a small murder, he'd said, a slow erasure of everything that makes a person human. Since finding that entry, I'd barely slept. I'd started pulling historical records, piecing together a picture of the Great Northern Purge that looked nothing like what I'd been taught. The Silver Moon Pack hadn't been violent aggressors. They'd been a prosperous nation negotiating peace when Counselor Valerius ordered a preemptive strike during their holy days 10 years ago. It hadn't been a battle. It had been a massacre. 3,000 children under the age of 10 killed first. The collar program wasn't about safety. It was about erasure. Destroy their culture, suppress their language, and what remained could be exploited for labor. We'd turned people into tools and called it justice. And that man I just bought? Lot 734, no name, as if he'd never been anything more than inventory? He was proof that even 5 years of torture hadn't completely destroyed what they were trying to erase. I looked at the collar release key in my desk drawer, passed down through 5 generations of Voss counselors. In a few hours, I would commit treason. Tonight, I tried to make peace with the fact that I was almost certainly going to die for this. I found him in one of the washing cells, naked except for the collar, being hosed down with cold water by 2 guards. His back was to me, and I could see the full map of scars, whip marks, burn scars, claw marks. Each mark was a story of suffering. "That's enough," I said from the doorway. The guards jumped. "Counselor, we weren't told." "Leave us." They exchanged uncertain glances. Marcus, the older guard who'd worked for my family for 15 years, stepped forward. "Ma'am, protocol requires—" "I am aware of protocol, Marcus. I wrote half of it. Leave us. Now." They left, though Marcus shot me a look that was almost like understanding. I'd noticed it before, the way he sometimes hesitated when enforcing the harsher protocols, the way he'd quietly arranged better medical care for injured alphas without being asked. The water shut off, leaving only dripping and harsh breathing. "Turn around," I said softly. For a long moment he didn't move. Then, slowly, he turned to face me. Up close, I could see that his eyes weren't just gold. They held flecks of amber and bronze, complex and beautiful. They were also filled with such cold hatred that I nearly stepped back. "What do you want?" His voice was rough, the words slurred and thick, as if each syllable had to fight through layers of fog. But they were words, clear enough to understand, spoken with deliberate intent. My heart hammered. "You can speak." A bitter smile twisted his mouth. "It hurts, like knives, in my skull. But yes." He swayed slightly. "They don't like when we think, when we remember." I looked at the device locked around his throat, watched the faint blue pulse of energy, and felt something crack open inside my chest. Mother had been right. This wasn't suppression. This was torture. The detention cell was isolated in the far corner of the estate, its walls thick stone that had once been part of the original fortress. I dismissed the guards 2 hours ago, claiming I wanted to conduct a private assessment. The Alpha was standing when I entered, as if he'd been waiting. In the dim light, his eyes gleamed like coins. "I need you to understand something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm going to remove your collar." He went very still. Then, "Why?" I pulled the key from my pocket. "Because what we've done to your people is monstrous. Because my mother died asking questions about the collar program. Because I've spent the last 2 months reading suppressed reports, and I finally understand that everything I was taught about the uprising and the purge was a lie." My voice cracked. "Because you're a person, and this is murder, and I can't be complicit anymore." His eyes searched my face. "You'll be executed. For this." "I know. The council will hunt both of us." "I know. I've read the legal code. I helped write some of it. I'm doing it anyway." "What's your name?" I asked. "Your real name, not the number they gave you." His jaw worked, struggling to access buried memories. Finally, Cain. Cain Thorne. The name hit me like a blow. I'd seen it in the suppressed files. Priority target. Eliminate on sight. "You were the Alpha King," I whispered. "The last king of the Silver Moon Pack." Pain flickered across his face. "Was. That man died 5 years ago. When they put this thing on me. When they made me watch." He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to. I'd read the interrogation reports. Counselor Valerius had personally overseen his capture, using psychological torture. They'd made him watch recordings of the purge, of his people being slaughtered over and over until the collar's suppression eroded his ability to process the trauma. I crossed the distance between us, my hands shaking. Turn around. He hesitated, then turned his back to me. I had to stand on my toes to reach the collar's release mechanism. When I braced my hand on his shoulder, I felt him flinch. I'm sorry, I said, for what my people did, for what I did. I signed requisition orders for these collars. I voted to expand the labor programs. I sat in council meetings and never asked questions. I fitted the key into the slot and turned it. The collar released with sharp clicks and a hiss. It fell to the stone floor with a clang that echoed in the small cell. Kane collapsed. He went down so suddenly I didn't have time to catch him. A sound tore from his throat, something between a scream and a sob, and his whole body convulsed. The scent that rolled off him was overwhelming, wild and clean like pine forests and winter storms. And underneath it, I felt something I'd never experienced. A pull from somewhere deep in my chest, an instinct that said, help him, comfort him, he's yours to protect. I dismissed mate bonds as propaganda, but the urge to soothe his pain was so strong it made my hands shake. I ran to the sink, filled a cup with water, and brought it back. The worst convulsions had passed. Kane, can you hear me? You need to drink. His head came up slowly. When his eyes met mine, I gasped. They were glowing with an inner light, and for just a moment I saw something ancient and wild looking out at me. Then he blinked and the glow faded. He took the cup with shaking hands and drank. You're Omega, he said, his voice clearer now. I can scent you. Lilac and old paper and something else. The bond, I whispered. I feel it too. How long have you known? Kane asked. We were still on the floor, him leaning against the wall, me sitting a careful distance away. He'd been free maybe 30 minutes now, and the shaking had mostly stopped. 2 months since I found the final piece, the report about Silvermoon. Before that, I'd been gathering fragments for 2 years. I paused. But if I'm honest, I've had doubts for longer. Small things that didn't add up. Questions I was afraid to ask. His eyes opened, pinning me with that golden stare. And you did nothing. It was an accusation. I did nothing, I agreed, my voice small. I told myself I was gathering evidence. The truth is, I was a coward. I was comfortable. I had my estate and my council seat, and I told myself that one person couldn't change the system. And now? Now I've read too much to pretend ignorance. Now I've met you, and I can't unsee that you're a person. I met his eyes. Now I'm a traitor. So at least I'm finally on the right side, even if it's too late to matter. He studied me. The collar, when it came off. You felt it too. The pull. I stopped myself from denying it. Yes, I don't know what it is. Mate bonds are real, he interrupted. The wolf knows its other half. Mine knew you the moment I saw you on that platform. It's why I could fight the collar's suppression long enough to speak. It's why 5 years of torture didn't break me completely. Some part of me was waiting for you. The words should have sounded insane. Instead, they resonated with something deep inside me, something I'd been trained my whole life to ignore. I don't understand what that means, practically. Right now, nothing. His voice was flat. Because you're an Omega who participated in the genocide of my people. And I'm an Alpha who should want you dead. The bond doesn't erase that. It doesn't make us compatible or destined, or any of the pretty lies Omegas tell themselves about fate. The words stung, but I couldn't argue. You're right. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything from you except... I trailed off. Except what? Except that we survive the next few hours, I said. The collar's biomonitor sent an alert, but the estate is remote. The High Guard will need time to mobilize. They'll have to verify the alert, assemble a response team, Travel here from the capital. We have until morning, maybe 8 hours, but we need to move now. I stood, brushing dust from my trousers. I know these grounds better than anyone. There are old tunnels that connect to the quarry systems. If we can reach them before dawn, we have a chance. He pushed himself to his feet, his movement still unsteady but driven by urgency. Can you fight? Can you run? Or will you slow me down? I can keep up, I said, though I had no idea if that was true. And I know things you don't: security protocols, safe houses, names of sympathizers who might help. Might? This is treason, I said bluntly. Trust is a luxury we can't afford. But there are people who've shown signs of doubt. My assistant, Lyra, the head of security, Marcus. They might help. Or they might turn us in. We won't know until we ask. Kane looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of dark humor in his expression. You're asking me to trust the people who've been complicit in my captivity. I'm asking you to trust me, I corrected. And I know I haven't earned that yet. But it's all I've got to offer. He stood there for a long moment, trembling with the effort of staying upright, his body still adjusting to freedom after 5 years of suppression. Then he turned to the door. Then let's go, before I change my mind about this insane plan. We made it to the tunnel entrance, hidden behind a tapestry in the old armory, without encountering guards. I just started working the concealed latch when Kane grabbed my wrist, his grip gentle but firm. Someone's coming, he breathed. 2 people, Beta. One of them is nervous, the other is calculating. I strained to hear and caught nothing. How can you— Alpha senses, he said shortly. The collar suppressed them. Now they're coming back. Like being deaf for 5 years and suddenly hearing again. He pulled me behind a rack of ornamental weapons. Don't move. Don't breathe if you can help it. Footsteps approached, and I recognized them. Lyra and Marcus, my assistant and the head of estate security. They stopped just outside the armory door, their voices low but audible. I'm telling you, something's wrong, Marcus said. She dismissed the guards 2 hours ago. That's never happened before. Never. And the price she paid for that alpha? She's been different for months, Lyra interrupted. I've been watching. She approved my brother's medical treatment without question when other counselors would have let him suffer. She asks about our families. She looks at us like we're people. There was a pause. Last week, I found her in the restricted archives pulling files on the Northern Purge. She didn't know I saw her, but the look on her face? It was horror, Marcus. Pure horror. My stomach dropped. Lyra had known. She'd been watching me, putting the pieces together. You think she's sympathizing? Marcus sounded conflicted rather than horrified. A Voss? A high counselor? I think she's her mother's daughter, Lyra said quietly. Elena Voss asked too many questions and fell from a balcony. Seraphine's been asking the same questions. And now she's dismissed guards from a high-value alpha purchase and locked herself in with him for hours. There was a long pause. Then Marcus. My daughter works in a collar factory. She's 11. Last month they made her class tour the production facility as part of their education. She came home and vomited for an hour, then had nightmares for a week. When I asked what was wrong, she said, Daddy, we're making things that hurt people. They told us it was good, but I saw an alpha's face when they activated it, and it's not good. His voice cracked. She's 11 years old, and they're teaching her to build torture devices and calling it civic duty. So what do we do? Lyra asked. If Seraphine's done something foolish, then we help her, Marcus said firmly, because maybe it's not foolish. Maybe it's the first sane thing anyone's done in years. The High Guard will have received a collar alert by now if she's removed it. They'll be here by dawn. We need to buy her time. The old quarry tunnels, Lyra said. My brother used to explore them as children, before the estate was expanded. They connect to the forest about 3 miles north. If she's smart, that's where she'll go. I'll delay the High Guard when they arrive, Marcus said. Claim there was a malfunction in the collar's biomonitor. Insist on verification protocols. That should buy an hour, maybe 2. And I'll make sure the tunnel entrance is accessible, Lyra added. Clear any obstacles, leave supplies if I can manage it. They moved away, their footsteps fading down the corridor. Kane and I stayed frozen for a long moment, processing what we'd just heard. Finally, I pulled free of his grip and stepped out into the corridor. We can't trust them, Kane said immediately. It could be a trap. It's not, I said with certainty. Lyra's brother, I did approve his treatment. He was suffering from what the physicians called moral injury, trauma from things he witnessed during the uprising. I gave him 6 months of paid medical leave and never asked for details. And Marcus's daughter? I closed my eyes, remembering the collar factory inspection. A young girl with haunted eyes assembling neural suppression modules with small, careful hands. I wrote a recommendation to end the child labor program. The council rejected it unanimously, said I was being too soft. Small kindnesses, Kane said quietly. Sometimes that's all it takes. I opened the tunnel entrance and we descended into darkness, the close walls pressing in around us. Kane navigated by instinct, his alpha senses apparently including enhanced night vision, while I stumbled along behind him with one hand on his shoulder for guidance. The tunnel was cold and damp, smelling of earth and old stone, but it felt like freedom. After perhaps 20 minutes of walking, I broke the silence. Tell me about Silvermoon, I said. What was it like, before? He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, beautiful. We had a city built into the mountainside, homes carved from living stone. Our people believed the earth was sacred, that we were caretakers, not conquerors. His voice was soft with memory. We had schools where children learned to read and write in 3 languages. Hospitals where we practiced healing arts your people called primitive, but which could cure ailments your physicians still struggle with. We had art and music and poetry. We had a legal system based on restorative justice, not punishment. He paused. We weren't perfect. We had conflicts with neighboring packs, disputes over territory. But we were working toward peace. We'd signed a preliminary treaty with the uprising leadership, agreed to terms for mutual cooperation. And then Valerius ordered the attack, I said. During your high holy days, when your warriors were in ceremonial observance. You've read the real reports, then. His voice had gone cold. Yes, we were unarmed, unprepared. We thought the treaty was moving forward. Instead, your people came at dawn with fire and steel. He stopped walking, and I nearly ran into his back. They killed the children first. Did your reports mention that? They went to the schools and the nurseries, and they killed every child under 10. Systematically, efficiently. 3,000 innocents before breakfast. I felt bile rise in my throat. The report mentioned the number, not the methodology. I was in the temple when it started, he continued, his voice hollow. I heard the screaming and ran. Found bodies in the streets, pups who'd been my nephew's friends, omegas who delivered my son. They'd slit their throats to prevent them from screaming, keep the element of surprise. His hands clenched into fists. I fought. We all fought. But we were unprepared, outmanned, and your people had those damned suppression collars. Every alpha they captured, they collared immediately, turned our own warriors against us. Your son, I said quietly. What was his name? The question seemed to surprise him. For a moment, I didn't think he'd answer. Then, Kieran. He was 6. Had my eyes and his mother's smile. Past tense. I didn't need to ask what had happened to him. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Your sorrow doesn't bring him back, Kane said flatly. Doesn't bring any of them back. 3,000 children, Seraphine. Plus another 5,000 omegas and elders. We lost 8,000 people in the first 6 hours. By the end of the week, Silvermoon had ceased to exist. He started walking again, his pace faster now, driven by old grief. They collared the surviving alphas and scattered us across the territories, sold us like cattle, gave us numbers instead of names. The goal was erasure, make sure no one remembered there had ever been a people called Silvermoon. I followed in silence, my mind trying to process the enormity of what my civilization had done. We'd committed genocide and called it liberation. We'd tortured survivors and called it justice. We'd built our peace on mass graves and convinced ourselves we were the heroes of the story. I don't know how to make this right, I finally said. I don't know if it's even possible. It's not, Kane replied. You can't unmurder 8,000 people. You can't give me back my son, or my mate, or the life I should have had. He glanced back at me, his eyes glinting in the darkness. But you can help me make sure it doesn't happen again. You can help me free the others who are still collared. You can help me burn the system to the ground. And after? I asked. After we burn it all down? What then? I don't know, he admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. Survival first, justice second. The future is a luxury we can't afford yet. We walked on in silence, two people bound by guilt and necessity, heading into an uncertain darkness with the weight of the dead on our shoulders. We emerged from the tunnels into the forest just as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. The night air was sharp with the promise of autumn, and I could see my breath in small clouds. Kane stood at the tunnel mouth, his head tilted as if scenting the wind. His whole body tensed with an alertness I'd never seen in a collared alpha. We're not alone, he said quietly. I froze. High guard? No, alphas. At least a dozen, maybe more. They're watching us. He raised his voice. I know you're there. Show yourselves or run. I don't have patience for games. For a moment, nothing happened. Then figures began emerging from the trees, moving with a silence that should have been impossible for people their size. They were all male, all bearing the telltale scars of long-term collar wear, ragged circles of damaged skin around their throats, some still with faint marks where the devices had burned or chafed. All of them looked at Kane with a mixture of hope and disbelief. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered with prematurely gray hair, stepped forward. We felt it, he said, his voice rusty from disuse, when your collar came off, like a wave of something, power, awareness. We've been collared for so long we thought we'd imagined what freedom felt like. He looked at Kane more closely and his eyes widened. The mark. You bear the Silvermoon mark. Kane pulled aside the collar of his rough shirt, revealing a crescent-shaped birthmark on his left shoulder. I'd noticed it earlier but hadn't understood its significance. I am Kane Thorne, he said simply, last Alpha King of the Silvermoon Pack. The gray-haired Alpha dropped to one knee. My king, I am Ronan of the Ironwood Pack. We were your allies. I survived the purge, was collared and sold. I've been working the quarries on the Voss estate for 4 years. He gestured to the others. Most of us are estate workers. We've been hiding in the forests, too weak to fight, waiting for something, someone. Then we felt your freedom like a beacon. We came to find whoever had been freed. One by one, the other alphas knelt. It wasn't the forced submission of slaves to masters that I'd seen on my estate. It was something else. Willing deference, respect freely given. Kane looked at the kneeling alphas, and I saw something shift in his expression. The exhausted fugitive was replaced by something harder, more regal. The king, I thought. This is what a king looks like. Rise, he commanded, and they obeyed. How many of you are there? In the quarries, on the estates? On the Voss estate alone may be 60 collared alphas, Ronan said. Most of them are too far gone. Even if we could free them, the collar damage is so severe they'd never recover. Their minds are broken beyond repair. Then we free who we can and give peace to those we can't, Kane said. But first, we need to survive. The High Guard is coming. We need to move. We know the forests, another alpha spoke up, younger with a scarred face. We've been surviving here, scavenging, hiding. We can guide you to the deep woods where the patrols don't reach. Kane looked at me. This is where you choose, Seraphine. You can go back, claim I overpowered you, escaped. You might survive the investigation. These men can take me from here. The offer was genuine, I realized. Despite everything, despite the bond and the danger, he was giving me an out. I thought about my estate, my comfortable life, my council seat. I thought about my father's disappointment and my family's disgrace. I thought about Lyra and Marcus and the risk they'd taken to help me. I thought about Kieran, 6 years old with his father's eyes, whose throat had been cut in a schoolroom. No, I said, I'm not going back. Kane studied my face. Once we do this, they'll hunt you like they hunt us. You'll be a traitor, an Omega who chose alphas over her own kind. They'll make your execution a spectacle. I know. They'll say you were seduced, controlled, that alphas use their abilities to manipulate you. Let them say what they want. I know the truth. I met his eyes. I'm not doing this because of the bond. I'm doing it because I finally understand that my entire civilization is built on a lie, and I refuse to be complicit anymore. Something flickered in his expression, not quite trust, but perhaps the beginning of respect. Then we run together, for now. He turned to Ronan. How many of your people are combat ready? Maybe 15, if we're generous. The rest are too weak from malnutrition and the long-term effects of collar suppression. Their bodies remember how to fight, but their minds still struggle with coordination, with planning beyond basic survival. 15 will have to be enough for now, Kane said. We need to reach the deep forests, establish a base, and then we start hitting the collar facilities. We free who we can, give mercy to those too damaged to save, and build an army. That's not a plan, I said. That's barely a hope. That's revolution, he corrected. And it's long overdue. Our first real target was a processing facility on the eastern edge of the Omega territories, where newly captured alphas were fitted with collars and conditioned for sale. We planned it for 3 days, studying guard rotations that Ronan's people had observed over months of hiding nearby. The night before the raid, Kane gathered our small force, 20 fighters, most barely recovered from their own collar damage. We go in fast, he said, his tactical mind clearly intact despite 5 years of suppression. 3 teams. Ronan takes the east entrance with the experienced fighters. I take the main entrance with our strongest. Seraphine coordinates from the tree line with the reserves. If anything goes wrong, she calls the retreat. I started to protest being left out of the fighting, but he cut me off with a look. You're the only one who knows High Guard protocols. If they send reinforcements, you're the only one who can identify their formation and give us warning time. He was right, but I hated it. The raid began at dawn. I watched from my position as Kane's team hit the main entrance with brutal efficiency. The guards never had a chance. They were used to broken, compliant slaves, not warriors who remembered how to fight. The facility's alarm went off within 30 seconds, a shrill wailing that split the morning air. Ronan, east side clear? Kane's voice carried across the compound. Clear, moving to secondary objective. I scanned the access road, my heart pounding. High Guard protocol dictated that any collar facility under attack would receive immediate reinforcement from the nearest garrison. The nearest garrison was 6 miles south. At forced march, they'd arrive in 45 minutes. At mounted speed, 20. Kane, I called out. We have maybe 20 minutes before reinforcements arrive, maybe less. Understood. He disappeared into the main building. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. 15 minutes. 18. At 22 minutes, I saw dust rising on the southern road. Incoming! I screamed. South Road! Mounted unit! You have maybe 3 minutes! Kane emerged from the building, alphas streaming out behind him. Some were walking on their own, Others were being carried, and behind them, a group of Kane's fighters carried the bodies of those too damaged to save. They'd given them mercy quickly and refused to leave them behind for desecration. "Move!" Ronan was shouting. "Into the forest! Now!" The High Guard mounted unit crested the hill just as the last of our people disappeared into the tree line. We ran. Behind us, I heard shouting, the sounds of pursuit. But the forests belonged to the Alphas who'd been hiding in them for years. They knew every path, every hiding place. We lost our pursuers within an hour. We'd freed 43 Alphas that day. 11 had been too far gone, their minds shattered by decades of suppression. I'd watched from my position as Kane knelt before each one, speaking softly in a language I didn't understand, the old tongue of Silvermoon, Ronan told me later. Then he'd given them quick, merciful deaths, with a blade he'd taken from the first guard he'd killed. Each one broke my heart a little more. "It's kinder than leaving them," Ronan said quietly that night, seeing my expression as we made camp. "The collar damage is permanent after a certain point. They're trapped in their own minds, unable to think or communicate or remember who they were. Death is mercy." "That doesn't make it easier," I said, my voice thick. "No," he agreed, "it doesn't. But it's necessary. They deserve peace, not to be left as living trophies of Omega cruelty." That night, while tending to the wounded, 3 of ours had taken injuries, though nothing life-threatening. I found Kane going through documents we'd taken from the facility. His face grew darker with each file he opened. "They've been experimenting," he said, showing me a report marked classified. "New collar variants. Some designed to amplify obedience, others to increase pain compliance. There's a note here about testing on pregnant omegas to see if collar exposure in utero affects the child's designation." I read the report and felt my stomach turn. This is Dr. Saren's work. She's the head of the Council's Science Division. She presents these findings at our quarterly meetings. I remembered sitting in those meetings, listening to her drone on about advances in alpha management technology, never quite connecting the clinical language to the reality of what it meant, never asking what increased compliance rates actually meant in terms of pain and suffering. "I sat there and listened," I said, my voice hollow. "I didn't ask questions, I just listened and voted to approve funding for the next phase of research. I have her blood on my hands, too." "And now?" Kane asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Now I'm going to make sure she answers for it," I said. "When this is over, there needs to be a reckoning. Trials. Justice." "Justice," Kane repeated, his voice hollow. "Do you really think there can be justice for genocide? Can you put a number on how many years in prison equals 8,000 dead?" "No," I admitted, "but we have to try. Because if we don't, if we just replace one tyranny with another, then what's the point? We'll just be continuing the cycle." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the war in his eyes, the part of him that wanted vengeance, pure and simple, fighting against the part that remembered being a king who valued law over rage. "We'll see," he finally said. "First we survive, then we talk about justice." Over the next 3 weeks, we hit 3 more facilities. Each time, we freed more alphas. Each time, we lost some who were too damaged to save. Our numbers grew to nearly 200, a ragged army of the broken and the furious. But it wasn't enough. The Council's response was swift and brutal. They sent the High Guard after us, elite Omega warriors trained specifically in alpha suppression techniques. We lost 17 people in the first major engagement, caught in an ambush while raiding a supply depot we'd been told was lightly defended. It was only Kane's tactical brilliance that kept us from being slaughtered entirely. He'd anticipated the possibility of a trap and had positioned scouts who warned us just in time to avoid complete encirclement. Still, 17 dead was 17 too many. I helped carry the bodies. I learned their names. I would remember them. That night, I found Kane alone at the edge of our camp, staring at maps by lamplight. The camp was quiet except for the soft sounds of the wounded and the low voices of sentries. You need to sleep, I told him. I'll sleep when we're safe, he said without looking up. We're never going to be safe, I countered. Not completely. But you'll be useless if you collapse from exhaustion. He finally looked at me, and I saw the shadows under his eyes, the hollowness in his cheeks. 3 weeks of constant movement and irregular meals had taken their toll. I can't sleep, he admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see them, the children, my son. I hear them screaming, his voice cracked. I was their king. I was supposed to protect them. Instead, I was in a temple praying while they died. I sat down beside him, careful to maintain a respectful distance. The bond pulled at me, urging me to touch him, to offer comfort. But I knew he wasn't ready for that. It wasn't your fault. You couldn't have known Valerius would violate the treaty. I should have known, he said bitterly. I should have seen it coming. The Omegas had spent decades under Alpha oppression. Of course they wanted revenge. I was naive to think they wanted peace. Some of them did, I said. My mother wanted peace. She died for questioning the system. And there are others, Lyra and Marcus, and countless betas who are tired of being complicit. Not everyone is Valerius. Enough people are, he said. Enough people signed off on the purge. Enough people built the collars. Enough people attended the auctions and bought slaves and convinced themselves it was justice. He looked at me, and his eyes were hard. Tell me honestly, Seraphine, if you hadn't found your mother's journals, if you hadn't read those reports, would you still have bought me? Would you still have removed my collar? Or would you have lived your comfortable life and never questioned any of it? The question cut deep because I already knew the answer. No, I said quietly. Without the journals, I would probably still be sitting in council meetings, voting for collar expansion, and telling myself it was for the greater good. I'd like to think I would have eventually questioned it on my own, but honestly, I don't know if I would have. Comfort is a powerful anesthetic for conscience. At least you're honest, he said. There was no warmth in his voice, but no active hostility either, just exhaustion. I'm trying to be, I said. I'm trying to see clearly now, even though it's painful, even though it means accepting that I participated in something monstrous. I paused. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I'd forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm committed to making this right, as much as anything can be made right after what's been done. He was silent for a long moment, studying the maps without really seeing them. Then, the bond makes it complicated. I know. If you were anyone else, I could hate you cleanly. But the bond keeps showing me your pain, your regret, your genuine desire to help. It's like trying to hate someone while also feeling everything they feel. It's exhausting. We don't have to act on it, I said. The bond, I mean. We can acknowledge it exists and still maintain boundaries, still be individuals with separate feelings and needs. Can we? He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw vulnerability there for the first time. Because every instinct I have says to protect you, to keep you close, to trust you even though trusting an Omega is what got my people killed in the first place. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't want to feel this way about you. You represent everything I should despise. But the bond doesn't care about should. I understood because I felt it too, the constant pull, the awareness of where he was and how he was feeling, the urge to soothe and comfort that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with some primal instinct I'd been taught to suppress. Maybe we don't fight it, I suggested. Maybe we acknowledge it exists, but don't let it define us. We're not fated mates in some romantic story. We're two people in an impossible situation, bound by biology we didn't choose. We can work together without pretending the bond makes us perfect for each other. He almost smiled. You're very practical for an Omega. I'm very practical for a person, I corrected. My designation doesn't define my personality, any more than yours makes you a mindless beast. Your people spent decades claiming the opposite. My people were wrong about a lot of things, I said. I'm trying to do better. This time he did smile, a small, tired expression that didn't quite reach his eyes, but was genuine nonetheless. You're trying, he agreed. I'll give you that much. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't even really acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall between us, and for now, that was enough. By the end of the third week, we'd freed nearly 200 alphas, and our presence had become impossible for the council to ignore. Wanted posters bearing my face appeared in every town and village, offering a reward of 10,000 credits for my capture. The caption read, Seraphine Voss, High Counselor turned traitor, wanted for treason, theft of council property, and conspiracy to commit terrorism. I stared at the poster Ronan had brought back from a supply run, at my own face, rendered in stark black and white, and felt a strange sense of detachment. That woman, the High Counselor in her silk robes and jeweled pins, felt like someone I'd known a lifetime ago. They've declared martial law in 3 territories, Ronan reported. Increased patrols, mandatory identification checks, curfews for all alphas still in bondage. They're terrified. Good, Kane said. Fear makes people careless. We can use that. But we'd suffered losses too. The 17 dead from the ambush, plus another 6 in smaller skirmishes. Each death weighed on Kane. I could feel it through the bond, the accumulating grief, the guilt of command, the knowledge that every life lost was a life he'd failed to save. We need a bigger victory, I said one night as we studied maps of the Omega territories. Something that shows we're not just raiders. Something that proves we can actually challenge the Council's power. The Citadel, Kane said quietly. Ronan looked up sharply. That's suicide. The Citadel has 500 guards, reinforced walls, advanced security systems. We're 200 malnourished people with stolen weapons. How do you propose we take a fortress? We have an advantage they don't expect, Kane said, looking at me. We have a High Counselor who knows every protocol, every security measure, every weakness in their defenses. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of expectation and suspicion in equal measure. I thought about my years of council service, the tedious security briefings I'd sat through, the architectural plans I'd reviewed when the Citadel had undergone renovations 5 years ago. The Citadel's main defenses are designed to repel external attack, I said slowly, thinking it through. But the internal security is less robust, especially in the administrative wings. They never expected to need protection from the inside. I paused. There are also the service tunnels. The Citadel is built on the ruins of an old Alpha fortress. Your people's fortress, actually, from before the uprising. When they conquered it, they built the new structure on top of the old foundations, but they didn't fill in all the tunnels. They're on the architectural plans, but most people don't know they exist or think they've been sealed. Kane's eyes gleamed. Can you get us into those tunnels? Maybe, if I can get close enough to the Citadel without being recognized. I thought about my face on wanted posters throughout the territory. I'd need a disguise, and we'd need to time it perfectly. There's a council session in 2 weeks. Most of the security will be focused on protecting the council members, not on watching the service entrances. 2 weeks, Kane said thoughtfully. That gives us time to prepare, time to gather more support. He looked around at his ragged army. We send word to every freed Alpha, every sympathetic Beta, every Omega who's brave enough to stand with us. We tell them the time has come. We're taking the Citadel, and we're ending this. The gathered Alphas erupted in fierce agreement, their voices raised in determination. I stood beside Kane and felt the current of history turning, felt the weight of what we were about to attempt. We would probably die. The odds were impossible, the plan barely more than a hope wrapped in desperation. But looking at the faces around me, Alphas who'd survived the unsurvivable, who'd reclaimed their humanity from the ashes of genocide, I believed we had a chance. A small one, but real. Kane's hand found mine in the growing darkness, his grip warm and steady. Through the bond, I felt his determination, his grief, and underneath it all, a flicker of something that might have been trust. Together, he asked quietly. Together, I agreed. And this time, when I said it, I meant it with every fiber of my being. The 2 weeks before the Citadel assault were a blur of preparation and impossible decisions. We sent runners to beta resistance groups in the capital, received cautious support from 3 council members who'd grown disgusted with Valerius's regime, and even found an unlikely ally in Dr. Saren's assistant, a beta woman named Kira who'd been forced to conduct collar experiments on children and had been looking for a way to atone. Kira had been approached by our sympathizers 6 months earlier and had been feeding information to the resistance for weeks before making direct contact, which was how we'd known which facilities to hit and when guard rotations would be weakest. She provided us with detailed schematics of the Citadel's security systems and information about where political prisoners were being held. She also brought news that chilled my blood. Valerius had become aware of the old tunnel system and had ordered demolition charges placed at key points. He's paranoid, Kira told us during a secret meeting in an abandoned farmhouse. He knows you'll try something during the council session. He's prepared for an assault through the tunnels. He plans to collapse them with your forces inside. Then we change the plan, I said immediately. We can't risk— No, Kane interrupted. We use it. If he's expecting us in the tunnels, we give him what he expects. But we split our forces. A smaller group goes through the tunnels as a diversion, while the main assault comes from elsewhere. Where? Ronan asked. The Citadel is a fortress. Every entrance is heavily guarded. Not every entrance, I said slowly, an idea forming. There are service entrances used by staff, deliveries, waste removal, maintenance. They're guarded, but not as heavily. And during a council session, with all the attention on the chambers, those entrances will be even less monitored. We'd need people on the inside to open them, Kane said. Can we trust anyone in the Citadel? Lyra, I said. If she's still alive and free, she'll help. She has access to the service wings as part of her administrative duties. And Marcus. If he managed to avoid suspicion after helping us escape, he could position himself to help. It was a desperate plan, built on too many assumptions, but it was all we had. We spent the remaining days drilling our fighters, stockpiling weapons stolen from high guard patrols, and praying to gods we weren't sure were listening. 5 days before the assault, I found Kane alone at the edge of camp, staring at a small object in his hands. As I approached, I saw it was a child's wooden toy, carved in the shape of a wolf. Kieran's, he said without looking up. I made it for his 4th birthday. Kept it hidden in my clothes when they captured me. The collar made me forget what it was for 2 years. When my memory started coming back, it was the first thing I remembered. My son's laugh when I gave it to him. I sat down beside him, close enough that our shoulders brushed. He didn't pull away. Tell me about him, I said. Not the death, the life. What was he like? Kane's thumb traced the wooden wolf's ears, worn smooth from handling. Fierce. Even as a pup, he had opinions about everything. Wanted to know how things worked, why people did what they did. His mother used to say he'd either be a great king or a great philosopher. A soft smile touched his lips. He was afraid of thunderstorms, but not of anything else. Would charge at alphas twice his size during play fighting, absolutely fearless. And he had this way of tilting his head when he was thinking, just like his mother. What was her name? I asked gently. Mira. She was Ironwood Pack originally, came to Silvermoon as part of a diplomatic marriage alliance. We didn't love each other at first. It was politics. But over the years, we built something real. Partnership, respect, affection. He paused. She died in the first hours of the purge, defending the Omega Sanctuary. They found her body surrounded by dead soldiers, her claws red with their blood. She went down fighting. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I know you hear that a lot, from me and probably everyone else who learns what you lost. I know it doesn't change anything. But I am sorry, and I wish there were better words for grief this profound. He finally looked at me, his golden eyes searching my face. Why do you care? Not because of the bond. I can feel through it that this is genuine. But why does my pain matter to you? I'm not your people. I'm the enemy you were raised to fear. Because you're a person, I said simply. Because your son deserved to grow up and be fierce and ask questions. Because Mira deserved to live. Because 8,000 people had names and lives and futures, and they were stolen, for no reason except fear and revenge. I met his eyes. And because I'm complicit in a system that killed them, and the least I can do is witness your grief. To see you and them as people, not abstractions. He studied me for a long moment, and I felt something shift through the bond, a lowering of walls, a cautious opening. I hated you, he said quietly, when you first removed the collar. When I could think clearly again, I hated you so much it was like poison in my veins. Every time you tried to help, every kindness you showed, I wanted to throw it back in your face. I know, I said. I could feel it through the bond. Sometimes I still can. But it's getting harder, he admitted. To hate you, I mean. You keep doing things that contradict what I was taught about omegas. You fight beside us. You risk your life for alphas you don't know. You listen when I talk about Kieran, and you don't look away from the pain. He touched my face, his calloused fingers gentle against my cheek. You're making it very difficult to see you as the enemy. My breath caught at the touch, at the intensity in his eyes. Is that a bad thing? I don't know, he said honestly. Part of me wants to keep hating you because it's simpler. Hate is clean. This, he gestured between us, at the space where the bond thrummed. This is complicated. You're the descendant of people who killed my family. I'm the symbol of everything your society tried to destroy. We shouldn't work. We definitely shouldn't feel this pull toward each other. But we do, I said softly. Feel the pull, even when it would be easier not to. Yes. He leaned closer, and I could feel his breath on my skin. The bond makes it impossible to ignore. But it's more than that now. I'm starting to see you as separate from what you represent. You're Seraphine, not just an omega or a counselor. You're a person who reads too much and thinks in strategies and tries so hard to do the right thing even when it costs you everything. I'm still learning, I said. How to see past designations and categories. How to see people instead of types. You're teaching me that. We're teaching each other, he corrected. Then, softly, can I kiss you? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications and possibilities and the weight of everything we'd been through. I knew I should say no. I knew we had more important things to focus on, that getting emotionally entangled would complicate an already impossible situation. But I also knew that we might both be dead in 5 days, that this moment might be all we ever had, and I wanted it. Yes, I breathed. He kissed me like I was precious, like I was something worth saving despite everything. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, giving me room to pull away. When I didn't, when I leaned into the kiss instead, it deepened into something more urgent. His hand cupped the back of my head, fingers threading through my hair, and I gripped his shoulders, feeling the solid reality of him under my hands. The bond sang between us, amplifying sensation and emotion until I couldn't tell where my feelings ended and his began. There was desire, yes, but also tenderness and grief and hope and the desperate need for connection in the face of overwhelming darkness. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. This is a terrible idea, he murmured. Probably the worst timing possible, I agreed. We're about to assault an impregnable fortress. We'll likely die. Almost certainly die, he corrected with dark humor. And even if we somehow survive, we're leading a revolution. There's no room for personal feelings when entire populations are depending on us. No room at all, I agreed. We kissed again anyway. The night before the assault, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bedroll staring at the stars through the forest canopy, my mind racing through every possible thing that could go wrong with our plan. There were too many variables, too many places where a single mistake would doom us all. I heard movement beside me and turned to find Kane settling onto the ground, close enough that I could feel his warmth. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too busy cataloging all the ways we're going to die tomorrow," I said. "You?" "Trying not to think about the fact that I'm leading 200 people into almost certain death." He was quiet for a moment. "Ronan used to say that a good leader carries the weight of every life under their command." I'm starting to understand what he meant. I rolled onto my side to face him. In the starlight, his features were all sharp angles and shadows. "You're a good leader, Kane. These people follow you because they believe in you, not because they're compelled." "They follow me because I'm a symbol," he said. "The last Silver Moon King. They need to believe that something of the old world survived, that we can rebuild what was lost. I'm not sure I can live up to that." "You already are," I said. "Every day, every decision you make. You chose mercy over vengeance. You could have killed the Omega guards at the facilities we've hit, but you didn't. You could have started executing council members when we freed prisoners, but you focused on building something new instead. That's leadership." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch lingering. "You give me too much credit. Half the time I don't know what I'm doing. I just try to make the choice that won't haunt me later." "That's all any of us can do," I said. We lay there in silence for a while, the weight of tomorrow pressing down on us. Finally, Kane spoke again, his voice low and raw. "If we don't make it out tomorrow, I want you to know something." My heart clenched. Don't say goodbye." "I'm not," he said. "I'm saying thank you for seeing me as a person when you could have seen an animal, for risking everything when you could have stayed safe, for teaching me that not all Omegas are the enemy." He paused. "And for making me remember what it feels like to care about someone, even when I thought that part of me died with my family." Tears stung my eyes. "Kane." "Let me finish," he said gently. "I don't know if what we have is the bond, or genuine feeling, or some combination of both. I don't know if we'd choose each other in a different world, under different circumstances. But I know that you matter to me, that your safety matters beyond strategic value, that when I imagine the future we're fighting for, you're in it." He cupped my face in his hands. "I'm not promising forever because we might not have tomorrow, but I'm promising now. Right now, in this moment, I choose you. Not because I have to, because I want to." I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat, so I kissed him instead, pouring everything I couldn't say into the contact. We held each other in the darkness, two people who should have been enemies, finding comfort and connection in the shadow of the coming storm. When we finally fell asleep, it was tangled together, his arms around me and my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and praying we'd both live to see another dawn. The assault on the Citadel began at first light. I entered through the main gates disguised as a beta administrator, my hair dyed dark and my face changed with subtle makeup that Kira had taught me to apply. My forged credentials identified me as a temporary worker assigned to the archives. The guards barely glanced at me before waving me through. I was gambling that the morning shift guards were new recruits from rural territories who'd never seen a high counselor in person, and that the wanted posters showing me in formal council dress with elaborate hair and jewelry looked nothing like the plain beta administrator I was pretending to be. Inside, I made my way to the lower levels, where the service tunnels connected to the old foundation. The halls were busy with Omega bureaucrats and beta staff going about their morning routines, none of them aware that war was about to come crashing through their orderly world. I found the tunnel entrance hidden behind a maintenance panel, exactly where the old architectural plans had shown it. The lock was ancient, and I used a technique Marcus had taught me to pick it. The tunnel beyond was dark and narrow, smelling of damp stone and centuries of neglect. I lit a small lamp and made my way into the darkness. According to our plan, Kane and a small diversionary force would be waiting at the northern entrance, ready to create enough noise to draw the guards' attention, while the main assault force, led by Ronan, would strike at the service entrances with help from insiders like Lyra. I was supposed to open the interior gates, allowing the diversionary force to create chaos in the lower levels, and then escape before Valerius could trigger the demolition charges. But I'd gone perhaps half a mile into the tunnel when I heard voices ahead. I doused my lamp and pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering. 2 figures emerged from the darkness, and in the faint light from their own lamps, I recognized them. Counselor Valerius and Dr. Selene, inspecting the tunnels personally. "The charges are set?" Valerius was asking. "Yes," Selene replied. "Placed at 3 key structural points. When the rebels enter, we'll have them trapped. 1 signal and the entire tunnel system collapses." "Good. The traitor will try something during the session," Valerius said. "She knows the Citadel's weaknesses. If I were planning an assault, I'd use the old tunnel system." They were moving toward the entrance I'd used. Valerius was coming from the northern tunnel entrance. He and Selene had been inspecting from both directions and were now meeting in the middle. My mind raced through options. I couldn't stay here, they'd find me. I couldn't go back, they were blocking that path. Through the bond, I felt Kane's sudden spike of alarm 3 floors above me and half a building away. He was in position at the northern tunnel entrance, and somehow he'd sensed my fear despite the distance. The connection between us flared bright, a tactical advantage that let him know I was in danger before any messenger could reach him. I moved deeper into the tunnel, away from Valerius, abandoning caution for speed. Behind me, I heard them reach my position, and Valerius curse when he found signs of my passage. "She's already inside," he snarled. "Alert the guards. Find her." I ran, my hands scraping against rough stone walls as I navigated by touch in the darkness. I reached the interior gate 10 minutes ahead of schedule and found it sealed with new locks, Valerius's additional security. Beyond it, I could hear movement. Kane and his forces, right on schedule, unaware of the trap. "Kane," I called through the gate. "Don't come through. It's a trap." I heard his voice, muffled by stone. "Seraphine? What's wrong?" "Valerius knows. He's planted demolition charges. If you come through, he'll collapse the tunnels and bury us all." There was a moment of terrible silence. Then, "Can you get out?" "I think so. I can go back." But even as I said it, I heard footsteps behind me, multiple sets moving fast. I turned to find a dozen High Guard soldiers emerging from the direction I'd come, led by Valerius himself. He'd circled around with reinforcements from the entrance I'd used. He smiled when he saw me. "Seraphine Voss," he said. "How good of you to deliver yourself directly to us. Saves us the trouble of hunting you down." I backed against the gate, my mind racing. Through the bond, I felt Kane's sudden spike of fear and rage. He could sense my danger even through stone and metal, and the connection flared between us like a beacon. "The Alpha King is on the other side of this gate, isn't he?" Valerius continued. "So close. So very close. And in just a moment, when I give the signal, he and all his rabble will be buried under 1,000 tons of rock." He gestured to one of the guards who held up a detonator. "You have a choice, Seraphine. Tell us how many entrances they're using, help us seal them all, and I'll make your execution quick. Refuse, and I'll make sure it takes days." I looked at the detonator, at the soldiers, at Valerius's cruel smile. I thought about Kane on the other side of the gate, about 200 people who trusted me to help them. I thought about my mother, who died asking questions. I thought about Kieran, who deserved to grow up fierce and questioning. I thought about 8,000 dead who would never have justice if we failed here. And I made my choice. I grabbed the lamp from my belt and threw it at the detonator. The guard fumbled, dropped it, and in that moment of chaos, I slammed my whole weight against the emergency release lever on the gate. It had been installed decades ago as a safety mechanism, designed to open gates during fires. I'd noticed it on the architectural plans and gambled that it hadn't been removed. The gate ground open with a shriek of protesting metal. Kane and a wave of alphas poured through, hitting the high guard like a tidal wave. Valerius's eyes widened in shock, then rage. "Detonate!" he screamed at the guards scrambling for the drop device. "Detonate now!" But Kane was already there. He moved faster than should have been possible, his alpha abilities fully unleashed, and ripped the detonator from the guard's hands. For a heartbeat, he looked at it, at the blinking armed lights. Then he crushed it in his fist. The lights went dark. The charges, whatever sophisticated triggering mechanism they'd had, were now useless without the remote detonator. Valerius stared at the crushed device in Kane's hand, then at Kane himself, and for the first time, I saw fear in the old Omega's eyes. "You," he breathed. "You're supposed to be broken. The collar should have destroyed your mind completely." "You designed it to destroy," Kane agreed, his voice cold as winter. "But you forgot that we're stronger than you gave us credit for. That love and purpose and sheer stubborn will can survive even your worst cruelties." He stepped toward Valerius, and the old Omega stumbled back. "I am Kane Thorne, last Alpha King of Silvermoon, and I've come to take back what you stole." The battle for the Citadel had begun. The fighting spread through the Citadel like wildfire. Kane's forces poured through the tunnel gate, engaging the High Guard in close-quarters combat, where alpha strength gave them the advantage, despite their malnourishment and recent trauma. I stayed close to Kane, armed with a knife I barely knew how to use, trying to be useful without getting killed. The bond thrummed between us, a constant awareness of his position and condition. Through it, I felt when he took a blade across his ribs, the sharp spike of pain that he forcibly suppressed as he kept fighting. I felt his fierce determination, his absolute refusal to fail after coming this far. And I felt something else, too, something tactical. He knew exactly where I was at all times, could sense when I was in danger before I consciously registered it myself. The bond wasn't just emotional, it was a combat advantage, allowing us to coordinate without speaking. We fought our way up from the lower levels, floor by floor. The Citadel's defenders were well trained, but they'd grown complacent after decades of unchallenged rule. They'd never expected to fight inside their own fortress, and the surprise assault caught them disorganized and unprepared. Meanwhile, at the service entrances, Ronan's main force was breaking through with help from Lyra and other sympathizers who'd sabotaged alarm systems and redirected guard patrols. On the third floor, we encountered Lyra. She was leading a group of beta staff in opening the service entrances, just as we'd hoped. When she saw me, her face flooded with relief. "Counselor, we'd heard you were captured." "I'm fine," I said quickly. "The main assault force, are they through?" "Yes, Ronan's leading them. They've taken the eastern wing and are pushing toward the council chambers." She handed me a guard's uniform she'd somehow acquired. "You might want this, your disguise is slipping." I changed quickly, grateful for better camouflage. Kane coordinated with his commanders, sending forces to secure key positions: the armory, the communication center, the detention blocks where political prisoners were held. The battle was brutal and costly. We lost 70 people taking the Citadel, more than a third of our force. But the combination of Lyra's sabotage, Marcus redirecting guard patrols from his position in the security center, and sympathetic beta servants opening secure doors gave us just enough advantage. And Valerius had made a critical error. He'd concentrated his best forces in the tunnels, expecting us there, leaving the upper floors dangerously undermanned when Ronan's main assault came through the service entrances. We reached the council chambers on the 4th floor and found them barricaded, 20 High Guard soldiers forming a defensive line. Behind them, I could see the council members, my former colleagues, huddled in fear. Valerius stood at their center, his face twisted with rage. "This is your last chance," he shouted. "Surrender now and I'll grant you quick deaths. Continue this madness, and I'll make sure every alpha in this territory suffers for your rebellion." Cain stepped forward, and the fighting paused as both sides recognized the moment's significance. "You don't get to grant mercy," he said, his voice ringing in the sudden quiet. "You lost that right when you slaughtered 8,000 innocents, when you collared survivors and erased their minds, when you built an entire civilization on genocide and called it justice." He gestured to the alphas behind him. "These people, these survivors, they're taking back their humanity, and you can't stop them." "We saved civilization," Valerius roared. "Alphas were tyrants. They enslaved omegas and betas, treated us like property. Everything we've done was to prevent that horror from returning." "So you became the monsters yourselves," I said, stepping up beside Cain. "You took their crimes and made them your own. You didn't break the cycle of oppression, you just reversed it." I looked at the council members I'd served with for 5 years. We could have built something better. A society where no one wears collars, where designation doesn't determine destiny. Instead, we chose revenge. We chose to make them suffer as we suffered. And now, we're paying the price. Several of the council members looked away, unable to meet my eyes. But Valerius only sneered. "Traitor. You betrayed your own kind for an alpha. You're pathetic." "No," Cain said quietly. "She's brave. She chose truth over comfort, justice over tribalism. She's more honorable than every single one of you." The battle resumed, shorter and more desperate than before. The High Guard fought well, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. One by one, they fell or surrendered, until only Valerius remained, backed against the council seat with a blade in his trembling hand. Cain approached him slowly, and I saw the temptation in his eyes, the desire for vengeance, for payment in blood for everything this man had taken from him. Through the bond, I felt that desire warring with his sense of justice, his knowledge that killing Valerius would make them no better than their oppressors. "Don't," I said softly. "He deserves to stand trial, to answer for his crimes in front of everyone. Killing him makes him a martyr." Cain stopped, his jaw clenched with effort. "He killed my son." "I know." "He destroyed my people." "I know." "He deserves to die screaming." "Yes," I agreed, "but you deserve better than to carry that blood. You deserve to be the king who chose law over revenge, the one who built something new." Cain stood there for a long moment, trembling with suppressed rage. Then he turned to 2 of his alphas. "Secure him. He faces trial for genocide." Valerius's face went white. "You can't. A trial will expose everything. The purge, the experimentation, all of it." "Yes," Cain said. "That's the point. No more secrets, no more lies. Everything comes to light, and people get to decide what kind of world they want to live in." As Valerius was dragged away, still protesting, Cain turned to me. Blood streaked his face and his breathing was labored, but his eyes were clear. "We did it," he said, sounding almost surprised. "We actually did it." I looked around at the captured citadel, at the council members being secured, at the freed alphas who'd fought their way to this impossible victory. Through the windows I could see the sun rising over the capital, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. "We did," I agreed. "Now comes the hard part." "Which is?" "Everything else," I said. "Building a new government, conducting fair trials, figuring out how 3 populations that hate each other can learn to coexist." I managed a tired smile. "Revolution is the easy part. Peace is where it gets complicated." He laughed, the sound edged with exhaustion and relief. Then he pulled me into his arms, heedless of the blood and dirt, and held me like I was the only solid thing in a world gone mad. "Together?" he asked, echoing the promise we'd made weeks ago. "Together," I confirmed, and meant it with everything I had. 10 years after the citadel fell, I stood in the courtyard of what had once been my family's estate and was now a school for children of all designations. The building had been converted. The opulent rooms turned into classrooms where beta, omega, and alpha children learned side by side. It was a small revolution, but a real one. Kane found me watching a group of children playing in the garden. Alpha pups wrestling with beta kids while omega children drew pictures in the dirt. They didn't see designations, they just saw friends. "Thinking about Kieran?" he asked gently. Over the years, we'd learned to talk about his son without the conversation destroying him. The grief never left, but it had transformed into something he could carry. "I was thinking he would have been 16 now," Kane said. "Almost grown. Probably challenging me on every decision, the way he challenged everything." He smiled, and it was bittersweet but genuine. "I like to think he'd approve of this, of what we're building." "I think he would," I agreed. "I think Mira would too." "She'd probably lecture me about political compromise," he said with a soft laugh. "She was better at diplomacy than I ever was. I'm too direct, too willing to burn bridges when I should be building them." "You've learned," I pointed out. "You've brokered 3 major treaties in the last 2 years. You convinced the Eastern Territories to adopt our constitutional model. You're exactly the leader people need." "We're exactly what they need," he corrected. "This doesn't work without both of us. Alpha and Omega working together, proving it's possible." I leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around me. A gesture so familiar now it was like breathing. We'd been formally bonded for 3 years, in a ceremony that had included elements from Alpha, Beta, and Omega traditions. It had been controversial and beautiful and perfectly us. One of the children in the garden called out to us, a small Alpha girl with bright eyes who'd been orphaned during the late-stage violence of the revolution. Kane had taken personal interest in her case, ensuring she had a good home and education. "Alpha King, come play," she shouted, and several other children joined in the request. Kane looked at me, silently asking permission to abandon our serious conversation. I smiled and nodded. "Go, I'll handle the boring administrative work." He kissed me quickly and jogged over to the children, who immediately swarmed him with requests to be thrown in the air or given rides on his shoulders. I watched him play with them, this man who'd lost his own child to senseless violence and somehow found it in himself to love other people's children anyway, and felt my heart expand with affection. Lyra approached me. She'd become my closest friend over the years and now ran the school's administrative operations alongside Marcus, who'd taken charge of security and facilities management. Her brother now taught history here, telling the real story of the purge to students who would build a better future. Marcus's daughter, now 21, worked as a counselor, helping young alphas process their family's trauma. "The latest census reports are in," she said, handing me a folder. "Population distribution is stabilizing. We're seeing more mixed designation communities forming naturally. People are choosing to live together rather than self-segregating." I scanned the reports, noting the trends. That's good. It means the next generation won't grow up with the same rigid barriers we had. "There's also this," Lyra said, pulling out a letter. "It's from the Northern Territories. They want to know if you and Kane would be willing to visit, help them establish their own rehabilitation programs. The work is spreading." I looked at the letter, thinking about what it represented. The work spreading beyond our borders. Other societies learning from our mistakes and our successes. "We'll go," I decided. "After the winter session of council ends. It's important." Lyra smiled. "You two never stop, do you? Always another mission, another project." "We can't afford to stop," I said. "The moment we get complacent, the moment we think the work is done, old patterns will reassert themselves. This peace has to be constantly maintained, constantly renewed." "That sounds exhausting." "It is," I admitted, "but it's also the most meaningful thing I've ever done. More meaningful than my council seat, more meaningful than my family name. This matters." I watched Kane with the children, saw him explaining something with animated hand gestures while they listened with rapt attention. He matters. What we're building together matters. It's worth being tired. Lyra squeezed my shoulder. Your mother would be proud of you, of everything you've become. The words hit harder than expected, bringing tears to my eyes. I hope so. I hope she'd think I finally lived up to the questions she asked, the doubts she had. She would, Lyra said with certainty. She'd see that you took her courage and made it into action, that you didn't just question the system, you helped tear it down and build something better. That night, lying in bed with Kane beside me, I thought about the long road we'd traveled. From that first moment at the auction when I'd seen a person where I should have seen an animal, through the blood and pain of revolution, through the grinding work of reconstruction and healing. What are you thinking? Kane asked, his hand finding mine in the darkness. That we did it, I said. Not perfectly, not without cost, but we actually did it. Built a world where your son would have been safe, where children can grow up without collars, without fear, without being defined entirely by their designation. We're still building it, he corrected gently. It's not done yet. Maybe it never will be. That's okay, I said, as long as we keep trying, as long as each generation does a little better than the one before. He pulled me close and I felt the steady beat of his heart against my cheek. Through the bond, I felt his contentment, his bone-deep satisfaction with the life we'd made together. I love you, he murmured into my hair. I love that you ask impossible questions and demand better answers. I love that you never settled for comfortable lies. I love who you've become. I love you too, I replied. I love your strength and your mercy. I love that you chose law over revenge. I love that you're the best man I know. We fell asleep tangled together, two people who'd started as prisoner and captor, master and slave, and had somehow transformed into true partners, equal, committed, building a future that honored the dead while giving hope to the living. The revolution had ended. The real work had just begun. And we faced it together, as we always would. Together.